Hello everyone, welcome back to Glop. I am your host, Derek. I got a couple of clips I'm going to show you, and then I want to tell you my thoughts. But I find it interesting that this, you know what? Let me let you see the clips, and then we'll get to my thoughts afterwards.
Iceberg about the size of Delaware broke off this ice shelf in Antarctica. We first told you about this dramatic split yesterday. A NASA satellite captured this picture of the 1 trillion ton iceberg. It broke off the Larsen C ice shelf and is one of the biggest icebergs ever recorded. The ice shelf is in the southernmost part of the world on the western side of Antarctica. This crack in the Larsen C ice shelf had grown to more than 120 miles before it broke off this week, producing one of the largest icebergs ever recorded. Its size is staggering, more than 2,200 square miles, twice the volume of Lake Erie. This collapse on the western peninsula of Antarctica follows the collapse of two other ice shelves, Larsen A and Larsen B, which broke off around the turn of the century.
It was sort of unprecedented because it hadn't happened in 10,000 years. I'd call that pretty unprecedented.
Ken Taylor is one of America's foremost ice scientists. We interviewed him when we visited Antarctica in February. He says it's not the floating icebergs that are concerning, but the fact that these ice shelves serve as a doorstop to keep glacial ice on land from melting quickly and drifting out to sea.
When that ice can flow into the sea and melt, that does cause a rise in sea level. There are several spots around here, around Antarctica, that are believed to be in this irreversible situation where the ice on the ground is going to flow into the sea, and there's nothing we can do to stop it at this point.
Taylor believes that could drive sea levels up even more than the 3 feet already predicted for this century. Scientists say the landscape of the Antarctic Peninsula has changed fundamentally. Now researchers will be studying how this break will affect the rest of the ice shelf.
The importance of what's happening here is that it gives a proxy as to what may happen to the rest of Antarctica as the rest of Antarctica keeps warming up. Sort of a wake-up call for what is looming ahead.
Interesting as they talk about this break-off causing map makers to now literally rewrite maps.
Yes. And then we'll be talking about the rising ocean levels and what that means.
So much to explain to our kids.
A lot to explore here, yeah.
Ice formation. A 200-kilometer-long crack in the sheet of ice has deepened and is ready to give way entirely, launching one of the biggest icebergs on record into the ocean. Researchers say it's a result of a changing climate that is altering the polar environments.
As you can see, the glacier no longer ends in the sea. Now we have beach. 20 or 30 years ago, those beaches did not exist. The glacier was falling directly to the sea. In other words, there has been a glacial retreat, probably a consequence of the climate change and the rise of temperature in this region.
The environment at the North and South Poles is changing rapidly and impacting the global climate. The world's polar ice caps are shrinking little by little. The Arctic is heating up twice as fast as the rest of the planet, with Greenland's glaciers receding particularly quickly. This process is speeding up. Melting snow exposes ice underneath, which then absorbs the sun's rays and leads to more thawing. At the opposite end of the Earth, 90% of the ice shelves on the Antarctic Peninsula are starting to disintegrate. Ice melt is also being observed in mountain ranges like the Himalayas, Kilimanjaro, the Alps, and the Pyrenees. In the Andes, glaciers are retreating and risk disappearing altogether. Ocean levels are rising due to the combination of melting ice and warmer sea temperatures, as warm water has a greater volume than cold water. At the current rate, scientists predict that by the year 2100, sea levels will rise between 26 centimeters and 1 meter. Islands in the Pacific or Indian Oceans like the Maldives will be submerged. Densely populated low-lying coastal areas like Bangladesh, Vietnam, the Netherlands, and the east coast of the United States are all under threat. A 2014 report from the Union of Concerned Scientists warns that within 30 years, Washington, D.C., here along the Potomac River, could see 300 flooding events a year due to rising sea levels, and the impact in other parts of the world could be much more.
So guys, I'm not one of those people who's going to say that climate change doesn't exist. I mean, the climate changes all the time. There are patterns, but should we be alarmed about this ice shelf that broke off? Now, there's evidence that shows that apparently there was not ice down there many, many years ago, and there is now. Now, if you try to go to Antarctica yourself, you can't get down there just because you want to go have a vacation. It's very expensive, very hard. You have to go through several things and little red tape, so to speak, before you could go down there. So we really don't know how this ice shelf truly broke off. I mean, some people even speculate that it didn't even happen, that this is just a ploy to scare the world into this thing about climate change, because we had global warming, we've had, you know, all these things saying that this is going to take place, and we've had record rainfall, we've had storms that has been stronger than ever. But let's just be honest about it. This is taking place whenever you have Fukushima that dumped so much nuclear waste into the ocean, and that there was so much debris that went around the world, that stuff was even washing up on the shores of Washington State and Oregon. And then you're sitting here going, is this normal? Is this okay? You know, when you have things washing up that comes from a nuclear waste, which I believe is one of the worst nuclear waste that we've ever had. I think in a way it was more detrimental to our world than Chernobyl. So yeah, let's say the water heats up. You've got great whites that are not going down south like they typically do. They're staying off the coast of California because the waters are warmer. Nobody wants to address that all this stuff, this climate change, came in the way it's coming really after Fukushima had its nuclear meltdown. So are we now seeing the beginnings of the repercussion from a man-made nuclear power plant that went, that dumped in so much nuclear waste? I think so. I also think that since the channel is called God Loves Our Passion, I think this fits right into the book of Revelation. You know, it talks about storms and the weather changing, and that we won't be able to tell the seasons apart. And, you know, Jesus lets us know this in the book of Matthew, chapter 24. And I think we're at that time where we're seeing the world changing, and we don't know how to catch up with it because we think we control nature, but in all honesty, we're actually subject to nature and what it wants to do. As always, guys, pay attention to your surroundings. You never know what lies on the corner. God bless.